The Nevada sun scorched the earth like a furnace as Caleb Norton trudged through the bone-dry scrubland of the Humboldt Desert, every step sending little clouds of dust swirling around his worn boots. At 27, he carried the kind of tired determination only a man who'd spent more than a decade chasing ghosts could possess. His wide-brimmed hat offered little shade against the oppressive heat, and the metal detector slung over his shoulder seemed to grow heavier with each mile. But he didn't stop. Not today. Not on the anniversary. Behind him, his best friend Mason Bryant struggled to keep up, occasionally checking their bearings with an old-fashioned compass. "You sure we're not walking in circles, Cal?" Mason asked, wiping the sweat from his brow with a stained bandana. "We've been out here for hours, man." Caleb paused, glanced back, and gave a tired nod of appreciation. "Thanks for coming. I know it's not your idea of a good Saturday." Mason shrugged, readjusting the straps on his backpack. "A deal's a deal. You take Jenny to that salsa class. I lend you my Jeep and camping gear. Still think she's getting the better end of this trade, though." Caleb cracked a faint smile, but it didn't last. His gaze drifted toward the distant Ruby Mountains, standing like silent watchers in the haze. "It was exactly 12 years ago today," he said, sweeping the metal detector in a slow arc. "My mom took Naomi out for a one-night camp here. I stayed with Grandpa because I thought sleeping in a tent was lame." He let out a bitter laugh. 17-year-old me was way too cool for dusty trails. Mason nodded, having heard the story many times, but knowing better than to interrupt. Caleb often spoke not to share, but to remind himself that they once existed. His mother, Harper Norton, a vibrant environmental consultant with a love for the wild, and his baby sister, Naomi, only 5 at the time, with sunshine hair and a love for frogs and peanut butter sandwiches. "Mom always talked about how my granddad used to bring her out here," Caleb went on, his eyes scanning the horizon. "She said it shaped her. Wanted Naomi to have the same connection. Said it was our Nevada legacy." A gust of hot wind kicked up a veil of sand. Mason lifted his shirt collar over his nose. "One night," Caleb repeated, voice hollow. "Just one night of sleeping under the stars, and they'd be back." But they never came home. It was like they'd been erased. Mason remembered the chaos that followed. The massive multi-state search. Helicopters, volunteers, even thermal imaging. Caleb had been the one to rally online support, creating forums and message boards that drew hundreds of strangers into the search effort. He'd turned their grief into motion. Every item found, an old backpack, a child's water bottle, even a torn bootlace, sparked short-lived hope that always dissolved into heartbreak. "They called it quits after 5 years," Caleb muttered, more to himself than to Mason. "Said maybe she ran off with Naomi, started a new life. But I know Mom. She wouldn't just vanish. Not without saying goodbye." Mason knew how badly the theory had haunted Caleb. The thought that his mother might have chosen to leave cut deeper than the idea of an accident. And when Caleb's grandfather passed a few years ago, the fire inside him flared even hotter. The old man had spent his final days combing maps, studying satellite imagery, and whispering to Caleb that the desert still had secrets to give. "I want to check the west side of the canyon this time," Caleb said suddenly, pointing beyond the rocky terrain. "Where the search dogs didn't go." "That's past the safe perimeter," Mason replied, pulling out his half-empty water bottle. "You know what the rangers said, loose footing, no signal, and mountain lions. Not the best combo." "Not too far," Caleb promised. "Just beyond the last GPS ping from the ranger logs. Please, Moss." Mason took a long drink, then screwed the cap back on with a resigned sigh. "Fine. But if we make it out of this alive, you're going to salsa class in full Latin attire." Jenny's orders. As they pressed on, the ground grew harsher, rockier slopes and brittle vegetation forcing them to slow their pace. At the last bluff where their cell bars flickered for the final time, Mason paused to send his sister a GPS ping. "Insurance," he joked, "in case we become those idiots who wandered off trail and ended up in a History Channel documentary." Another hour passed, the heat oppressive, the silence thick. Caleb's breath had grown labored, his eyes squinting into the glare when suddenly he stopped. Something shimmered on the horizon. A flicker of chrome. Metal? He stepped to the edge of a steep ravine and peered down. There, half buried in dust and desert scrub, was a vehicle. Not just any vehicle. It was an overturned truck rusting in the sun, with a faded sticker still clinging to the frame. 3 mountain peaks in blue, orange, and green. Caleb's breath caught. His legs turned to jelly. "Mason," he croaked. "Get over here." Mason stumbled over, eyes widening as he followed Caleb's trembling finger. That's your mom's truck," Caleb whispered, knees buckling. "That's her mountain sticker. She loved those stupid decals." Mason pulled out his phone and began snapping photos. "It's real," he murmured. "You found it." But Caleb was already scanning the ravine for a path down. "We have to go. There might be—" "No." Mason grabbed his arm. "No way. That drop is death. We go back. Report it. Let search and rescue do it properly." Caleb stared long and hard at the crushed, sun-baked wreckage below, his past, his pain, everything he had searched for, before nodding, barely. "Okay," he whispered. "Let's go." As they retraced their steps, the sun dipped lower behind the mountains, casting long shadows over the truck in the canyon. It had waited there for nearly a decade. Now, finally, someone had come. The drive back to Elko felt like a waking dream. Caleb gripped the edge of his seat as Mason's Jeep barreled down the rutted desert tracks, kicking up dust in a swirling trail behind them. Every bump jarred his thoughts loose, yet none could dislodge the image now carved into his memory. His mother's truck, broken and rusted, lying like a corpse in a shallow desert grave. When their phones regained signal near the base of a dry ridge, Caleb ignored the flood of notifications and went straight to his contacts. His fingers shook as he dialed. The line rang twice before a familiar gruff voice answered. "Detective Archer," came the reply, calm and no nonsense. "It's Caleb Norton," Caleb blurted. "I found my mom's truck, west of the Ruby Range, down in a ravine near a dried creek. I have photos." There was a pause. "You're sure?" "Positive," Caleb said, glancing at Mason, who held up his phone and mouthed, "Sending them now. We're texting the coordinates and images." "All right. Head to the sheriff's office in Elko. We'll meet there. Bring your friend." The call ended. Caleb exhaled shakily, then turned to Mason. "He's meeting us in town." "Good," Mason replied. "Because that drop-off was no accident, man. That thing was hidden." They reached Elko just before dusk. The sheriff's building loomed quiet, except for the buzz of police radios and the glow from inside. Caleb practically leapt out of the Jeep, his boots hitting the gravel with purpose. Inside, Detective Archer, a stocky man with salt and pepper hair and eyes like weathered steel, sat with the photos already loaded on a laptop. "That's Harper's truck," he said without preamble. "No doubt. We even ran the plate against old case files." "So what now?" Caleb asked, struggling to keep the urgency from breaking his voice. "We're organizing a recovery unit. SAR team, forensic crew, and a tow vehicle. If we leave soon, we can reach it before full nightfall." Caleb's pulse quickened. "I want to go with you." Archer gave him a measured look. "We'll allow it, but stay clear of the scene until we secure it." Within the hour, a convoy rolled out. 2 sheriff's cruisers, a search and rescue van, a technical extraction truck, and Mason's battered Jeep bringing up the rear. Archer rode in the lead, speaking quietly into his radio. As they approached the recovery site, The dying sunlight painted the desert in golden hues. Helicopter rotors thumped overhead, throwing sand into tight spirals as a chopper prepared for an aerial lift. Archer briefed them as they watched the team deploy cables and harnesses. "They'll lower Tex to the wreck. If it's stable, we'll begin the pull." Caleb stood rooted, watching as figures in neon vests descended the canyon wall with precision. Time became irrelevant, just waiting, hoping, dreading. Finally, the truck was hoisted, groaning as it rose like some ancient relic unearthed from time. When it hit level ground, Archer stopped Caleb with a firm hand. "Let the forensic crew go first." The vehicle was a ruin. The tires flattened, body crumpled, paint blistered. Technicians swarmed it with cameras, tweezers, and evidence bags. A woman with a streak of gray in her ponytail beckoned Archer. He leaned in as she whispered something, then turned back grim. According to terrain search logs, that ravine was checked thoroughly 12 years ago. The truck wasn't there. Caleb's breath caught. So someone moved it? Most likely. "We estimate it's been there 7 to 8 years, based on rust patterns and sun bleaching. Someone kept it hidden for a while, then dumped it." "That means this was never an accident," Mason said quietly. "It was staged." "Looks that way," Archer confirmed. "The truck was deliberately placed, maybe to throw us off or buy time. Either way, it's evidence of a crime." Caleb staggered back a step. His whole life, he'd imagined some tragic mistake, a wrong turn, an accident. But now the truth stabbed deeper. Someone had taken them in the truck and erased a decade of truth. "Detective," one of the techs called, holding up a dusty, melted plastic case. "Found this wedged under the passenger seat. Looks like a drone box." Archer took it and carried it over. "Recognize this?" Caleb nodded immediately. "That's hers. She got a drone for her birthday that year. Said she wanted to document their trips. Said Naomi loved watching it fly." Archer cracked open the warped case, but it was empty. "Drone's gone," he said. "Figures. Could have been valuable." But Mason peered into the lining and pointed. "There's something in the seam." He pulled out a micro SD card, crusted with grit. "Good eyes," Archer said, pocketing the find. "We'll scan this back at base. Might be something left." Back at the temporary command post, the tech team inserted the card into a laptop. Static. Nothing. Caleb's hope faltered. Then Mason grabbed the card, wiped it gently with his shirt, and slid it back in. A folder opened. Dozens of video files. Caleb leaned in, breathless, as the first video played. Harper Norton, smiling, sitting on the truck ladder, blonde hair tied back, sun behind her. Beside her, Naomi, 5 years old, in a yellow sundress, waved and giggled into the drone camera. "Mom," Caleb whispered, tears burning his eyes. "And Naomi." More videos followed, setting up camp, Naomi collecting rocks, Harper cooking on a portable stove. They looked safe, happy. "This footage confirms something important," Archer said, pausing on a wide aerial shot. "They were still in the designated camping zone when this was recorded, not even close to where we found the truck." Mason frowned. "So someone moved it later." "Exactly," Archer nodded. "That drone was filming the real trip, which ended somewhere else. That truck was dumped to bury what happened." He pulled a flash drive from his jacket. "We'll make copies. This changes the case status officially, from missing persons to suspected homicide and abduction." Caleb couldn't speak, could barely breathe. Everything he'd known, every theory, was crumbling. But beneath the grief rose something else. Fury. They didn't vanish. They were stolen. Back in his modest one-story house on the edge of Elko, Caleb sat hunched over his desk, a steaming mug of stale coffee beside him, and the glow of his computer monitor illuminating tired eyes. His body buzzed with fatigue, but his mind refused to rest. The drone footage that Detective Archer's team had copied for him looped silently on his screen, each clip like a ghost from a past life. He watched his mother smile, watched Naomi spin with arms outstretched beneath the sky. He had viewed these videos at least 10 times since returning from the sheriff's station, analyzing every background detail, every rock, every ridge, every shadow. He wasn't sure what he was looking for, but deep down he believed something had to be there, something everyone else had missed. Somewhere between the frames, the answers lived. The final video, the drone's longest flight, captured a sweeping panorama of the desert. Caleb hit pause, zoomed in. The screen pixelated as he sharpened the image. On the far horizon was a strange, jagged ridgeline. It didn't match the maps he had studied for years. It looked wrong, unfamiliar. That wasn't where the truck was found, and it wasn't on the trail routes the ranger logs had shown. Caleb leaned closer, whispering to himself, "That's not part of the usual terrain." He shoved his chair back and dropped to his knees, pulling open a drawer beneath his bed. From inside, he retrieved a large, cracked storage chest. He unlatched it with hands shaking from caffeine and adrenaline. Inside lay his grandfather's old survey maps, yellowed with age and curling at the edges. Dozens of topographic charts, field notes, and hand-drawn notations from decades of wilderness work. Caleb spread several out across his bed, then the floor. For over an hour, he compared ridgelines and contour lines. Then he found it. A small region near the southwest edge of the Ruby Range, labeled in red ink, Private Military Test Zone Inactive. Scribbled beside it, almost like an afterthought, was a note in his grandfather's spidery handwriting. Danger. Unstable cliffs. Restricted access since '89. Caleb's heart thundered. He remembered vague stories from childhood. His mom and grandpa talking about forgotten bunkers and blacked-out maps. At the time, it had felt like tall tales, exaggerations to entertain a curious boy. But now they felt real. Caleb grabbed his phone and took several photos of the annotated map. He sent them in a group text to Mason and Detective Archer. The clock read 3:27 a.m., but he didn't care. He added a message. "Compare this to the drone shot. I think she was near this zone. Might explain why the truck was moved." He stared at his phone screen for a long moment, but no replies came. Sighing, he slumped back in his chair. His mother's voice played in his head like an echo, always telling him to trust his instincts, to follow the details others ignored. He didn't sleep that night. When he arrived at the sheriff's office the next morning, the building was already active with motion. Officers moved in and out with purpose. A coffee pot hissed in the corner, and satellite maps were pinned to bulletin boards. Mason stood near the water cooler, looking freshly showered but exhausted. He handed Caleb a paper cup. "Saw your message. You know you sent that at like 3:30 in the morning, right?" Caleb took the cup without replying, his eyes already searching for Archer. The detective appeared a moment later, carrying a stack of files under one arm. "Caleb, about that ridge. It matches, doesn't it?" Caleb cut in. "It's where the drone was facing." Archer raised a hand. "Yes, we compared landmarks. It's likely your mother was still filming near the military boundary when that video was taken. But listen, this isn't some trail you can just walk into. It's still designated as a restricted site. Decommissioned or not, it's off limits without federal clearance." "So get the clearance," Caleb said. "What if they're there? Or someone who knows what happened?" "We don't have probable cause to believe the facility is being used," Archer replied. "The roads are overgrown. It's been inactive for over 30 years. We need more than a video from over a decade ago to make a case." "You said yourself, someone moved the truck years later," Caleb argued. "What if they're using that place to hide?" What if that's why the truck had to be dumped away from it? We're not dismissing it, Archer said. But today, our priority is the recovery site. We're sending teams to canvass the area around the ravine. That means you stay at base camp. Not a chance, Caleb shot back. I've searched this desert longer than anyone in this room. I'm going. Archer sighed, the lines around his eyes deepening. You wait at the command tent. If anything significant comes up, we'll call you in. Mason stepped forward. I'm coming too. Archer raised a brow. You don't have to. It's not your fight. Mason shrugged. Someone's got to keep an eye on this guy. He tends to go rogue. Archer relented. Fine. You both wait at camp. Stay on the marked paths. No exceptions. By noon, the new base camp had been set up near the ravine site. Multiple tents dotted the sand, packed with radios, GPS units, and shade canopies. Technicians coordinated routes. Searchers combed surrounding ridges with trained dogs. Inside the communications tent, Caleb paced while Mason opened his laptop. What are you doing? Caleb asked. Searching old satellite images. Mason muttered. Trying to find anything about that facility. It might not be as abandoned as they say. Caleb stopped pacing. You believe me now? I believe you're annoying enough to be right, Mason said. Also, look at this. He pointed to a grainy image showing the trail leading toward the facility. It was faint but visible. Recent tire tracks. An officer nearby, a young guy named Reed, overheard and leaned over. I could drive you out for a recon pass. See if anything's actually there. Off the record. Caleb's eyes widened. Seriously? Reed nodded. No promises. We stay in the Jeep. If there's anything weird, we report and bounce. But Archer doesn't have to know unless it matters. Mason hesitated. You sure this is smart? Since when have we done smart? Caleb replied. The three of them left shortly after, telling the command tent they were surveying the perimeter. Reed drove them along the Sand Streak Trail, the Jeep jostling wildly. After 45 minutes, a rusted chain-link fence emerged, partially collapsed. Beyond it, half hidden by dust and years of neglect, were several squat buildings, camo-tarped vehicles, and storage crates. That's not abandoned, Mason murmured. Reed slowed. We need to go back. Now. Caleb stared through the glass. His skin prickled. Something about this place was wrong. It felt alive, watched. We'll come back, he said quietly. But next time, with backup. The ride back to base camp was tense and quiet, with only the sound of gravel crunching beneath the tires and the occasional gust of desert wind slicing through the Jeep's open windows. Caleb sat in the back seat, staring out at the endless dunes. The image of that compound burned into his mind. Those weren't ruins. They were operational. Something was happening out there, and someone didn't want it found. Mason rode shotgun, arms crossed, occasionally glancing into the side mirror as if expecting a tail. Reed, the young officer, drove with hands tight on the wheel, clearly rattled by what they'd seen. They didn't speak until the tents of base camp came into view again, fluttering in the dry wind like weary flags. We say nothing yet, Caleb said, voice low. Not until we know exactly what we're up against. Reed nodded reluctantly. I'll file my notes later. Just if Archer finds out, I'll be off the case. Understood, Mason replied. Your secret's safe for now. They parked and headed toward the communications tent. An officer checked them in without question, and for a brief moment, Caleb allowed himself to think they'd made it through unnoticed. But then the ground shifted beneath his feet, not literally, but in that way the world does when fate decides to pull the rug. I want to see the ravine again, he said suddenly. Mason blinked. Now, yes. I need to stand where the truck was found. Just something feels off. It's within the perimeter, Reed said carefully. Just radio when you arrive. But don't wander. Caleb agreed, and soon they were back in Mason's Jeep, headed along the marked route to the recovery site. The scene was much quieter now, most of the search team having dispersed for the day. A couple forensic officers remained, organizing samples and cataloging evidence. The tent set up near the ravine was empty, save for a table with water bottles and folders. Caleb wandered to the edge, staring down at the spot where his mother's truck had rested. The canyon looked deeper in person, jagged edges and sun-bleached stones scarred by time and silence. You think they pushed it off from here? Mason asked, stepping beside him. Had to, Caleb said. But they picked this place for a reason. It's remote, rarely traveled. Perfect dump site. Mason checked the fuel gauge. We'll need gas soon. Let's hit the nearest station before dark. They drove back toward town, taking the rough road that cut across the edge of the valley. The station they found was a lonely structure with a dusty awning and a flickering neon sign that barely read open. Mason pulled up beside the pump. I'll go pay, he said, stepping out. Caleb stayed by the Jeep, stretching his legs, eyes scanning the empty landscape. The quiet was almost soothing until it was shattered by the roar of an engine. A dusty pickup skidded to a halt behind them, and before Caleb could react, 4 men jumped out, faces grimy, movements efficient. The first blow came fast, a fist to the back of his head that sent stars exploding across his vision. He stumbled, tried to fight, landed a punch squarely into one attacker's ribs, but it wasn't enough. Strong arms grabbed him, dragged him toward the truck. He shouted for Mason. Through the store window, he saw him bolt out the door, mouth open in alarm. But another man was already intercepting him. Caleb twisted, kicked, yelled again. Then pain seared through his skull as something struck his temple. The world blinked out. He woke to the smell of beer and sweat, his head pounding. The room was dim, lit by sunlight that filtered through slatted wooden blinds. He was seated in what looked like a rundown bar, bound to a chair with coarse rope. Dust motes floated in the stale air. Boots thudded on the wooden floor. A man with a scar down his left cheek leaned into his line of sight. He's awake, he called out. Another figure entered, taller, broader, with hard eyes and a coiled intensity. This him? Yeah, scarred face said. The guy from the news. The one who found the truck. The leader cursed under his breath, pacing. Idiots, he hissed. You were supposed to watch the perimeter, not bring him here. We thought, don't think, the leader barked. Now, the whole sheriff's department will be sniffing around. Again. Caleb blinked, trying to focus. Where's Mason? He asked hoarsely. Where's my friend? The leader turned, slowly approaching. You should have left alone, kid. Let the past die. Your mom, your sister, they're gone. Caleb stared at him, heart pounding. That woman, the one I saw before you closed the door. That was Naomi. That was my sister. The room fell silent. The scarred man glanced at the leader, uneasy. The leader exhaled sharply. That girl's name is Laura now. She doesn't remember you. You're lying, Caleb said, voice trembling. You took her. You raised her like some pet. She's one of us now, the man replied coldly. And you might still be useful. Depends on how cooperative you are. Where's Mason? Caleb demanded again. What did you do to him? The man shrugged. Alive. For now. That depends on you. You tell the cops you made a mistake, that you were wrong about the truck, wrong about everything. And you all walk away. Caleb's laugh was dry, humorless. After everything? After 12 years. The man's eyes narrowed. We were just going to take the drone. But your mother resisted. Pulled a weapon. It escalated. She didn't make it. The girl was too young to understand. So we gave her a new life. Caleb's stomach turned. You murdered her. And stole a child. We gave her shelter, the man snapped. And she's better off than she would have been out there, lost and alone. The door creaked. A girl entered, slender, long blonde hair tied back. Her eyes were wary, her steps careful. She looked at Caleb without recognition. "Lara," the leader said. Tell him you don't know who he is." She hesitated. Then softly, "I don't." But something flickered in her gaze. A question. A buried memory. "Naomi," Caleb whispered. "It's me, Caleb. Your brother." Her eyes widened. The leader snapped his fingers. "Enough. Get her out." As she turned away, Caleb saw her hand touch the wall, hesitating. Then she was gone. The leader approached again, voice low. "Think about what I said. You're not leaving unless we're done. One way or another." The door slammed shut. Caleb sat in the quiet, pulse thundering, mind racing. She was alive. She'd seen him. And now he had to figure out how to get them both out before it was too late. Hours passed in suffocating silence. Caleb sat slumped in the chair, wrists raw from the rough rope binding them, his mind racing, searching every shadow in the dim barroom for an escape that didn't exist. Dust floated lazily in the fading sunlight that leaked through the slatted blinds, casting long lines across the floor like prison bars. His eyes stayed fixed on the door where she had disappeared, Naomi, or rather, Lara, as they now called her. She had changed so much, taller now, older, her features sharpened by years he'd missed. But there had been something in her eyes, a hesitation, a question she hadn't yet found the courage to voice. That flicker gave him hope. He couldn't let go of it. The sound of footsteps echoed from the hallway. The door creaked open again, and there she was, framed in light, stepping cautiously inside. This time she came alone. Her movements were quieter now, slower, as if uncertain of what she was doing. She looked at him, brow furrowed, and for a moment neither of them spoke. "Why did you say my name's Naomi?" she asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Caleb shifted, wincing at the pull on his shoulders. "Because that's who you are. My little sister. You were 5 when they took you." She stayed near the door, arms wrapped around herself. "They told me I was found alone in the desert, that I didn't have anyone, that I was lucky to survive." Caleb's throat tightened. "They lied. Our mom brought you camping. I didn't go because I thought it was boring. I stayed with Grandpa. You two never came home. We searched for years." She looked away, jaw tense. "I have no memory of that. Just sometimes I dream. About a blonde woman and a lizard in her hand. She calls me something I can't remember." Caleb smiled faintly despite the pain. "You used to catch lizards and try to keep them in your pockets. Mom said no more pets after you tried to feed one peanut butter." A small, surprised laugh escaped her lips before she caught herself. Her eyes flicked back to his, searching. "That's not in any police report," she said, as if testing him. "It's just something I remember," Caleb replied. "Like how you used to call Mom's drone the flying camera, or how you'd cry if your sandwich didn't have the crust cut off." Something softened in her expression, but doubt still clung to her like a shadow. "Even if what you say is true," she said slowly, "this is the only life I know. Carlos, he took care of me, protected me, taught me how to survive." "He kidnapped you," Caleb said, his voice sharp with restrained fury. "He killed our mother. He stole your childhood and lied to you for over a decade. That's not protection, Naomi. That's control." Her jaw clenched. "They're not all bad. Some of them treated me like family." "Because you didn't know better," Caleb said gently. "You were a child. And now you're almost 17 and starting to question everything. That's good. It means part of you still remembers what's true." She stared at the floor, silence stretching between them like a tightrope. Then she moved forward cautiously, and knelt beside him. Her hands trembled as she reached for the rope. "I shouldn't be doing this," she murmured. "If Carlos finds out, we'll be gone before he can do anything," Caleb said. "You, me, and Mason." She paused. "Mason, they didn't hurt him. He's locked in the shed behind the bar. I snuck a key from a storage room." She finished, untying his wrists. He let out a ragged breath, flexing his numb fingers. "There's a satellite tracker in my jacket. They took it from the Jeep, but probably didn't know what it was. If we can get far enough, I can activate it." She nodded. "We have to move quickly. Carlos is out for now, but his men could be back any minute." She helped him stand. He swayed, dizzy, but stayed upright. Together, they slipped out the back door into the blinding late afternoon sun. The desert stretched before them, open and vast. Caleb followed Naomi around the side of the building toward the shed. The air was hot and dry, every sound amplified by silence. She unlocked the shed. Inside, Mason sat slouched against the wall, hands tied in front of him. His face lit up when he saw them. "You're alive," he said hoarsely. "Good timing. I was about to start gnawing on the plywood." Caleb laughed despite the tension. Naomi handed Caleb a small utility knife. He cut Mason free. "We don't have long," she warned. "They'll notice I'm gone soon." Caleb pulled the satellite tracker from his pocket. The device's red light blinked dimly, still functional. He flipped the activation switch. "That should ping our last coordinates to the sheriff's office. If they're monitoring, they'll know where to find us." They crept through the backlit, past a row of rusted shipping containers and a half-buried pickup truck. Just as they reached the edge of the fence, a voice rang out behind them. "Stop." It was the scarred man from earlier, his gun already raised. "Back away from her now." Caleb pulled Naomi behind him. "She's not going anywhere with you." "She's not yours," the man sneered. "She never was." Caleb scanned the area. 10 feet to their left, on the bar's back patio, lay a discarded rifle. Too far to reach. Then he spotted something closer, a heavy wrench resting on a barrel. He whispered, "On 3, duck." Naomi's fingers clenched around his arm. 1, 2, 3. They dropped. Mason, already moving, lunged and hurled the wrench with a grunt. It struck the man in the shoulder. He cried out, fired a shot that went wide, and stumbled back. Caleb ran forward, tackled him to the ground, and wrestled the gun away. "Go," he shouted. Naomi and Mason bolted through the open fence. Caleb grabbed the man's radio, shoved the gun into his waistband, and followed. They ran through the desert, dodging shrubs and debris, lungs burning, hearts pounding. Behind them, voices shouted. Engines revved. "They're coming." Naomi gasped. "Keep going." Caleb yelled. "We just need to get far enough," a distant siren wailed. Then another, and another. Naomi turned, eyes wide. They heard the beacon. Over the ridge, flashing red and blue lights appeared. Police cruisers kicked up dust as they descended upon the compound. Helicopters chopped the sky. Bystanders scattered. The bar exploded in movement. Carlos emerged from the building, face contorted with rage, gun in hand. He saw Naomi raise the weapon. "Get down." Mason yelled. Caleb pulled her to the ground as a crack of gunfire echoed. More shots followed. Officers returned fire. Carlos fell, clutching his side, but not before grabbing Naomi's wrist and dragging her down with him. Caleb rolled forward, tackled him. The gun slid from Carlos's grip. Naomi broke free. Sirens screamed as officers surged forward. One of them cuffed Carlos while EMTs rushed in. Caleb held Naomi, who trembled in his arms. "It's over," he whispered. "You're safe now." But in her eyes, a storm still raged, the start of a reckoning that had only just begun. The scene was chaos in every direction. Police cruisers flanked the compound, their lights casting a strobing haze of red and blue across the cracked desert floor. Helicopters hovered low overhead, their engines roaring, their spotlights sweeping over the debris-strewn ground as more tactical teams poured in. Officers moved with swift precision, guns drawn, shouting commands over radios and to one another. Carlos, bleeding and bound, lay face down in the dirt under heavy guard, his face twisted in pain and disbelief. Naomi stood beside Caleb, her hands trembling, eyes fixed on the dust clouds kicked up by retreating officers as they cleared the last pockets of resistance. She flinched as an EMT approached, but didn't pull away when Caleb squeezed her hand. "You okay?" he asked, voice soft but urgent. She nodded slowly. "I think so. They'll need to examine you," he said gently. "It's protocol." She looked at him, unsure. "I don't want to go with anyone. Not unless you're there." "You won't be alone," he promised. "Not again." Mason limped toward them, one arm bandaged from a grazed bullet wound, the other clutching a water bottle. "So," he said between breaths, "that went about as smoothly as a cactus massage." Caleb let out a weary laugh. "You're alive. That's more than I expected an hour ago." Detective Archer arrived next, flanked by 2 officers. His face was tight, his eyes hard. He stopped a few feet from Caleb and Naomi, taking in the scorched scene around them. "I should be furious," he said, voice low. "You disobeyed direct orders. Went rogue. Endangered civilians." "We found them," Caleb said simply. "We found her." Archer looked at Naomi. She stood slightly behind Caleb, watching him carefully. "Naomi," he asked. "Or should I call you Laura?" She hesitated, then stepped forward. I don't know what to be called right now. I think Naomi was who I was before." "That's good enough for me," Archer said. "You're not under arrest. We know what happened here. We'll need a full statement, but not today." "Am I in trouble?" she asked quietly. Archer shook his head. "You were taken as a child. You were raised in captivity. Anything you did while under their influence is not on you. Our concern is making sure you're safe, and that these men can never hurt anyone again." Naomi nodded slowly. Her shoulders sagged with a weight Caleb hadn't realized she was carrying. "I remember things," she said. "Not everything. Just pieces. Sounds. Faces. Those memories will come in time," Archer said. "But you'll need help. A lot of it." "She'll have it," Caleb said, stepping beside her. "We'll do whatever takes." Officers continued swarming the facility. Drones captured aerial images. Evidence bags were loaded into vans. Technicians marked off locations across the compound. Archer turned to one of his deputies. "Secure every building, especially the back storage and underground lot. I want eyes on every container." Caleb frowned. "Underground lot?" "Yeah," Archer said grimly. "Turns out this place had a lower level. We found trapdoors disguised under crates. Surveillance equipment, weapons, satellite relays. It wasn't just a hideout. It was a smuggling hub." Naomi paled. I helped with some of that. I didn't know what it all was. I thought it was inventory. I swear." Archer raised a hand. "You're not being judged. You were doing what you were taught, what you thought was right." Caleb looked at Naomi, seeing the fear flicker in her eyes. "It's okay," he told her. "We'll get through this. Together." Paramedics treated minor injuries. News vans began arriving on the edge of the perimeter, setting up cameras, reporters adjusting microphones. The story was already spreading. The cold case reopened, the daughter found alive, the hidden facility revealed. Archer approached Caleb again. "We've arranged temporary housing in town. Psychological support, medical care, legal counsel. It's all covered. But we need to keep things quiet until we finish securing the site. There are still a few suspects unaccounted for. You think more of them are out there? Mason asked. Archer nodded. Carlos wasn't the only one pulling strings. This whole operation had a structure. Some of these men weren't just thieves. They had contacts across the border, weapon sales, drug caches. We just cracked open something much bigger. Caleb absorbed that in silence. It wasn't just about Naomi anymore. It never had been. Her story was just the beginning. He glanced toward one of the ambulances. Naomi sat inside, legs swinging off the edge, wrapped in a blanket. She looked so much older than 17 in that moment, her eyes reflecting too many years of darkness. Caleb walked over and sat beside her. You okay? He asked. She shrugged. They're saying I'll need therapy, that I might not remember everything, or that remembering might be worse. It's your choice, he said. No one gets to tell you what to remember or forget. But whatever comes, I'm here. She looked at him, her gaze intense. Do you think Mom knew this might happen? That someone would come after her? Caleb considered that. She probably didn't expect anything like this. But she trusted the wild. She loved it. She wanted to share that with you. That's all. Naomi stared out at the desert, quiet for a long moment. Sometimes at night, I dream about a porch light. Always on, even when everything else was dark. Caleb smiled. That was Grandpa. He always left it on. Said it was for you too, just in case. I think I remember it, she whispered. The shape of it. Reporters began shouting questions at the edge of the police line. Archer gave a nod, and a press officer stepped forward. Time to make it official, Archer said. People want answers. What will you say? Caleb asked. That we reopened the Norton case, Archer replied. That a miracle happened. But the real story isn't over. It's just beginning. As Caleb walked with Naomi toward the police vehicle waiting to take them back to Elko, he looked once more at the desert. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in burnt orange and deep crimson. The same sky his mother had looked up at all those years ago. The same desert that had taken so much, only to finally give something back. The drive back to Elko was quiet. Caleb sat beside Naomi in the back of the unmarked police vehicle, the hum of tires over the highway lulling them both into a half-conscious daze. The sky outside was painted in fading strokes of indigo and rose, the stars just beginning to blink awake across the Nevada sky. Up front, Mason had finally dozed off, head pressed against the window, a small bandage peeking out from beneath his collar. Naomi leaned against Caleb's shoulder, arms wrapped around herself, her expression unreadable. She hadn't spoken much since leaving the compound. The officers driving said nothing either, respecting the silence, understanding that trauma didn't need commentary. Caleb looked down at his sister, unsure what to say. What could he say? That everything was okay now? That the worst was over? That the pain would fade with time? They were all lies, and she would see through them. So instead, he said nothing, just sat there, quietly offering her the one thing he could, his presence. When they arrived at the sheriff's department, Archer was waiting outside under the flickering porch light, hands in his coat pockets, face solemn. We've arranged accommodations, he said as they climbed out. Not a cell. A private room in the medical wing. Naomi will have support, a counselor on standby, meals, whatever she needs. Naomi nodded faintly, then paused as she looked at the building. This isn't jail? No, Archer said gently. You're not under suspicion. You're a witness and a survivor. He led them inside. The building was buzzing with activity. Officers processed evidence from a raid. Analysts studied confiscated documents, and maps covered several whiteboards in the operations room. Archer motioned them down a hallway where a nurse greeted Naomi with a soft smile and a clipboard. We'll just do some quick vitals and get you settled, sweetheart, she said, leading Naomi toward a quiet room. Caleb started to follow, but Archer stopped him with a hand on his arm. "Give her a few minutes," he said. "She needs space even from you." Caleb hesitated, then nodded. They stood together in the hallway, the soft buzz of fluorescent lights filling the silence. "She's strong," Archer said finally. "More than I expected." "She's been surviving for 12 years, Caleb said. "That takes a kind of strength most people never touch." Archer crossed his arms. "Her statement will be valuable. She knows more than she realizes." "You're going after the facility?" "We already are," Archer said. "With her testimony, the feds are stepping in. Homeland Security, ATF, even the military is getting involved." Turns out the abandoned facility had been off the books active for years. Black market weapons, surveillance, maybe even trafficking. The drone footage your mom shot might have caught too much. That's probably why they were targeted. Caleb's chest tightened. "So it wasn't random?" "No," Archer confirmed. "We think she stumbled too close to something sensitive. Maybe followed noise. Took footage of a convoy she shouldn't have seen." Carlos's crew wasn't just a bunch of desert drifters. They were protectors of something bigger. Caleb exhaled slowly, the weight of it all settling on him. "What happens now?" "Now," Archer said, "we build a case. We clean up what's left. And we protect your sister from whatever fallout's coming." They were interrupted by the nurse returning. "She's asking for you," she told Caleb. He followed her into the room. Naomi sat on the edge of a small hospital bed, wrapped in a fresh blanket, hair damp from a quick rinse, skin scrubbed clean of dust and dried blood. She looked younger now, more fragile. She looked up as he entered, her eyes tired. "Hey," she said. "Hey," he replied, pulling a chair close. "They make you fill out a lot of forms." "Too many," she murmured. "They want to know if I remember anything specific. People's names. What trucks looked like. Codes they used. I remember some stuff. Not all." "Whatever you remember will help," Caleb said. "But don't force it." She nodded. "They asked about Mom." Her voice trembled slightly. "I don't remember her face. Just the sound of her voice. I feel terrible." "You were 5, he said gently. "You were forced to forget. That's not your fault." She looked at him, tears brimming in her eyes. "Do you think she would have kept looking for me too?" "Without a doubt," he whispered. "She would have burned down the desert to bring you home." Naomi wiped her eyes. "I want to remember her. I want to know who she was. Who I was. I feel like I don't belong anywhere right now." "That's okay," Caleb said. "You belong with me. That's enough for now." She reached into her blanket and pulled out a small coin-shaped object. "Mason gave me this. Said his sister Jenny made him carry it. A GPS tag, like the one you used." Caleb smiled. "Yeah, that thing saved our lives." "I'm keeping it," she said quietly, "just in case I ever get lost again." "You won't," he promised. "I'll make sure of that." She nodded, then laid back, exhaustion pulling her under. Caleb sat beside her, watching her breathe, watching her chest rise and fall. The girl he had searched for across deserts, through years of silence, was finally here. But this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something uncertain and new. Outside the room, Archer conferred with agents and detectives. Names were exchanged, files opened. Somewhere, on a distant screen, a man watched the footage from the drone and closed a laptop with slow precision. Caleb didn't know yet that the ripples of what they had uncovered were already reaching places far beyond Elko. He didn't know that some secrets, once unearthed, didn't stay buried. But in that room, for one quiet moment, there was peace. The following morning broke clear and golden, casting long shadows across the sleepy streets of Elko. Caleb awoke on the small couch in Naomi's temporary recovery room, his back aching, the hospital blanket barely enough to keep out the chill of dawn. Naomi was still asleep, curled beneath a heavier blanket now, her breath even and peaceful for the first time in days. Caleb rose quietly, stretched, and stepped into the hallway where a deputy offered him a fresh coffee and a tired nod. "Detective Archer wants to see you," the officer said. "He's in the evidence lab." Caleb made his way down the corridor, past officers, analysts, and personnel who had clearly worked through the night. Archer stood in a side room surrounded by sealed evidence bags, file folders, and a high-resolution monitor that displayed images from the facility, crates of weapons, rows of surveillance drives, and stacks of paperwork taken from a locked cabinet beneath the floorboards. "Morning," Archer said, not looking up from the monitor. "Sleep at all?" "Not really," Caleb replied. "She finally did, though." Archer gestured toward the screen. "We cracked one of the hard drives. Surveillance footage, shipment logs, drone feeds from their own recon. These guys weren't amateurs. And they weren't just running stolen goods, they were building a network." "You think they were planning something bigger?" Caleb asked. "I don't think," Archer said grimly. "I know." He tapped a keyboard and brought up a paused video frame. It was grainy, but clear enough. A convoy of trucks moving through a canyon, escorted by men with rifles. In the foreground, barely visible, was a shadow of another drone, Harper's drone. "Your mother caught this on camera," Archer explained. "It matches one of the clips from the memory card you recovered. We've cross-referenced the terrain with this footage. It places her within a mile of that convoy. They spotted her drone. That was the trigger." Caleb stared at the screen, jaw clenched. They were afraid she'd expose them. "She wasn't just collateral," Archer said. "They made a decision to eliminate a threat. And my sister? They took her because they couldn't risk leaving a witness. A 4-year-old was easier to control than an adult. But keeping her alive, that was unexpected. We believe Carlos got attached. He treated her like property," Caleb said through gritted teeth. "Called her Lara. Gave her a role in his little empire." Archer turned from the monitor. "The media's asking for statements. So are federal agencies. Everyone wants to know what happens next." I told them the truth. "We're still figuring that out." "And Naomi?" "There will be scrutiny," Archer said. "She's part of a high-profile case now. There will be reporters, questions, maybe even testimony if the case expands into federal court." Caleb exhaled slowly. "She's not ready for that." "No," Archer agreed. "But she won't face it alone." They returned to Naomi's room together. She was sitting up now, eating a small breakfast tray of toast and fruit. She gave them both a wary glance as they entered. "Am I in trouble?" she asked again. "No," Archer said firmly. "But I need to ask you something difficult." She nodded, swallowing a bite of toast. "Okay." Archer sat across from her. "Do you remember any names? Anyone besides Carlos? Anyone who visited the compound regularly?" Naomi furrowed her brow. "There was a man they called Commander. He had a shaved head and wore military jackets, but no insignia. He only came at night. Sometimes they gave him crates. Sometimes he brought envelopes." "Did he ever speak to you?" "No," she said quickly. "But Carlos didn't want anyone near him. Said he was important. That we'd all be in trouble if we disrespected him." Archer nodded. "We believe this commander is our key to the broader operation. Your memory could be critical." Naomi looked down at her plate. "If I remember more, do I have to testify?" "Eventually," Archer said gently. "But not until you're ready. And not alone." Caleb stepped closer. "We'll figure it out together." Naomi nodded slowly. "I want to help. I want to stop them. But it's scary." "That means you're sane," Archer said. He stood. "Take the day. Tomorrow we begin official interviews. For now, get some fresh air." Reconnect. You've earned it. Caleb and Naomi left the station a few hours later, avoiding the small knot of reporters outside by using a back exit. They walked in silence down Main Street, past diners and storefronts where people glanced their way with cautious curiosity. At a small park on the edge of town, they sat on a bench beneath a large cottonwood tree. Naomi stared at the swings across the gravel path, watching a few kids laugh and run in the crisp morning air. "I don't know how to be normal," she said suddenly. "I don't know how to act, or what to wear, or what music to like. Everything I did before, I don't remember it." Caleb reached into his backpack and pulled out a small photo album, one he'd built over the years with printed snapshots, some old, some recent. He handed it to her. "These are memories," he said. "They're pieces of who you were, and maybe who you can be again." She opened the book slowly. There were pictures of her as a toddler covered in mud, of Harper grinning with sunglasses and a wide-brimmed hat, of Caleb with braces and a crooked smile holding a frog. Naomi laughed. "You look like a dork." "Still do," Caleb said, relieved to see her smile. She flipped to a page with a photo of her clutching a stuffed animal, a bunny with one torn ear. "Do we still have it?" she asked. Caleb nodded. "We found it in a wash 10 years ago. Grandpa kept it. I have it at home." She didn't speak for a while, just held the photo. Finally, she looked up. "I want to go there. To Mom's house. To Grandpa's. I want to see it." "You will," he said. "Soon." "And the porch light?" "Still on," he whispered. She leaned against him again, the photo album resting in her lap. The wind stirred the leaves above them. Around them, life in Elko carried on, mundane, unremarkable. But for the first time in 12 years, Caleb and Naomi existed in it together. They didn't need to talk about what had been taken. They were starting to discover what could still be found. 3 days later, Caleb stood on the gravel driveway of the old Norton house, a narrow single-story ranch-style home nestled at the edge of the Elko Valley, surrounded by scrub and silence. The house hadn't changed much in the 12 years since Naomi disappeared. The exterior was still painted a soft beige with faded green shutters. The porch light, as promised, was on, glowing softly in the growing dusk like a silent beacon. It had remained on every night since Harper and Naomi vanished, first because Grandpa insisted it was a symbol of hope, then because Caleb couldn't bring himself to turn it off. Now finally, the one person it was meant for had returned. Naomi stepped out of the car slowly, eyes sweeping across the property, lingering on the garden beds overrun with sagebrush and the tire swing that still hung from the lone cottonwood tree in the yard. She carried the photo album pressed tightly to her chest like a shield, her other hand clutching the stuffed rabbit that Caleb had retrieved from a trunk inside. She was quiet, taking it all in, not moving any closer yet. "This was our house?" she asked, voice soft, unsure. "It still is," Caleb said. "I've kept it up as best I could. Grandpa handled most of it until he passed." "I remember the swing," she whispered. "But I thought I dreamed it." "You didn't," Caleb replied, stepping beside her. "We spent hours out here. You were always fearless. Climbed higher than any kid your age." "Did Mom push me on it?" she asked, her gaze distant. "Every evening," he said. "She'd sing that weird folk song while you kicked your legs like you were trying to touch the clouds." Naomi gave a ghost of a smile, then slowly walked toward the porch. She paused at the steps, hesitated, then climbed them with deliberate care. Her fingers brushed the railing. "This paint," she murmured. "I remember the color from my fingers. I helped her paint one summer. I spilled a whole bucket on the grass." Caleb laughed. She laughed too. Said green grass deserved green paint. They stepped inside together. The air smelled faintly of cedar and dust, the kind of comforting musk that clung to old homes and older memories. The living room was as Caleb had left it, tidy, but lived in. A few framed photos still lined the mantel above the fireplace. Harper holding baby Naomi, Grandpa fishing with a grinning 8-year-old Caleb. Rare group shot taken in the mountains, with wind in their hair and joy in their eyes. Naomi approached the pictures slowly, her fingers trembling slightly as she reached for the one of Harper. "That's her," she said, voice cracking. "That's Mom." "Yeah," Caleb said. "She was the best." Naomi stared at the photo for a long time. "I thought I'd never see her face again," she whispered. "Not even in my mind." "You don't have to remember everything at once," Caleb said gently. "Just what comes naturally." "Do you think she'd still recognize me?" she asked suddenly. Caleb nodded. "Absolutely. In a heartbeat. You still have her eyes, her stubborn chin, her quiet strength." Naomi's lip trembled, but she held herself steady. She turned to look around the room. "It's smaller than I thought," she said. "Everything felt bigger in my memories." "That's childhood," Caleb said. "The world shrinks as we grow up." They moved into the kitchen, where Caleb had laid out dinner, simple grilled cheese sandwiches, tomato soup, and apple slices. "This used to be your favorite," he said. Naomi smiled. "Still is." They ate in silence for a while, the ticking of the wall clock the only sound between them. Halfway through her sandwich, Naomi set it down and looked up. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Not of being here, but of forgetting again. What if I wake up tomorrow and all of this, the house, the photos, you feels like a dream?" "Then we'll start over," Caleb said. "As many times as it takes." She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "I don't want to lose this again." "You won't," he promised. After dinner, they went through more of the house together. Caleb showed her the hallway closet still filled with Harper jackets, the linen cupboard where Naomi used to hide during hide-and-seek, the attic where Grandpa stored boxes labeled with meticulous handwriting, Naomi's toys, Harper's trail maps, family photos. In one of the boxes, Naomi found a videotape marked Naomi's 5th birthday. Caleb set up the old VCR, and they watched it together on the dusty television in the den. The screen flickered to life with grainy footage of balloons, a cake shaped like a ladybug, and Harper laughing as Naomi smeared frosting on her cheeks. Naomi watched in awe, tears slipping silently down her face. "I remember the song," she said. "The one Mom sang." "You always made her sing it twice," Caleb said. "Said one time wasn't enough." She leaned into him, and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. The video ended, replaced by static, but neither of them moved. The house, once a mausoleum of grief, now breathed again with presence, life, memory. Near midnight, Caleb set up the guest room for Naomi, putting fresh sheets on the bed and placing a small lamp beside her nightstand. The stuffed rabbit sat beside the pillow. "You good?" he asked at the doorway. She nodded. "It's a little weird, but good weird. You'll get used to it." "Thank you," she said, "for never giving up on me." "There was never another option," he said. "Good night, Naomi." "Good night, Caleb." He closed the door softly, then stood in the hallway for a long moment, staring at the light beneath her door. She was home, not fully healed, not completely at peace, but home. And that, more than anything, felt like a miracle. In the stillness of that quiet Nevada night, with the porch light glowing as it always had, the Norton family, broken for over a decade, began the long, tender process of becoming whole again. 2 months later, the first snow of the season fell over Elko, dusting rooftops and desert brush in a thin white veil that sparkled beneath the pale winter sun. The Norton house stood quiet and resilient at the edge of town, its porch light still glowing steadily every night, no longer just a symbol of hope, but now one of reunion, of promises kept, of a family reassembled from the fragments of memory and time. Inside, the scent of cinnamon and coffee filled the air. Naomi stood at the kitchen counter, wearing one of Harper's old flannel shirts that she'd found in the closet and claimed as her own, her hair pulled into a loose braid. She was reading from a recipe book, brow furrowed in concentration as she tried to replicate a muffin recipe Harper had scribbled in the margins years ago. Her face was calm, more open than it had been when she first arrived, though the shadows under her eyes sometimes returned in the quiet moments. Caleb sat at the dining table nearby, a stack of legal documents and case files in front of him. The investigation into the facility was still ongoing, now headed by federal agents, but he had remained involved, acting as Naomi's advocate and liaison, ensuring she wouldn't be swept up in bureaucratic red tape or media frenzy. She'd already met with a trauma counselor, started slowly reintegrating into local programs for teens who'd survived abduction and long-term captivity, and begun her education again, at home for now, on her own terms. Naomi's recovery wasn't linear. There were days when she barely spoke, when loud noises made her flinch, or when a particular phrase or smell sent her spiraling into silence. But there were also moments of light, when she laughed genuinely at a joke Caleb told, or when she showed Mason how to hack an old security camera system she'd once used at the compound, or when she asked to be called Naomi again, no longer clinging to the name Laura that had been forced upon her. Today was one of those better days. The radio played softly in the background, some classic folk tune that Harper had once adored, and Naomi hummed along as she measured flour into a bowl. Caleb watched her for a moment, then turned back to his files. Among them was a new report from Detective Archer, summarizing the progress of the investigation. The man known only as Commander had been identified, retired military, operating under multiple aliases, connected to arms trafficking networks across 3 states. He was still at large, but the raid on the compound had dismantled the bulk of his logistics network. More arrests had followed. Witnesses had come forward. Naomi's account had triggered a domino effect, giving courage to others who had stayed silent for too long. There were still dangers, rumors that certain factions wanted to silence her, that the operation went higher than anyone realized, but law enforcement had increased security around the Norton residence, and a protective order had been quietly filed through the courts. Caleb had left his job at the local mechanic's garage to stay home full-time, devoting himself to Naomi's recovery and assisting the case however he could. It wasn't the life he imagined, but it was the life he wanted. A knock at the door broke the rhythm of their quiet morning. Naomi stiffened slightly, instinctively glancing toward Caleb. He gave her a reassuring nod and walked to answer it. On the porch stood Mason, holding 2 takeout cups of cocoa and a bag of pastries. He grinned, brought peace offerings, and sugar. Naomi relaxed at the sight of him. Mason had become her safe space, the third point in the triangle that kept her grounded. "You're late," she said, smirking slightly. "You're welcome," he replied, handing her the bag. "And you better appreciate those. I nearly had to arm wrestle a toddler for the last chocolate croissant." Caleb stepped aside as Mason entered, his presence bringing a familiar energy to the room. They gathered around the kitchen island, sharing food, teasing each other gently. For a while, the conversation stayed light, about local news, about a dog Mason was thinking of adopting, about the snowstorm forecasted to hit next week. But then Naomi grew quiet again, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. "Can I ask something?" she said finally. Both men turned to her. "Do you think she'd be proud of me?" "Mom, I mean, after everything." Caleb didn't hesitate. "She'd be beyond proud. You survived something unimaginable, and now you're choosing to live. That's strength. That's her legacy in you." Naomi nodded, her throat tightening. "I keep dreaming about her. Sometimes we're back at the campsite. Sometimes she's just watching from a distance. I don't remember the details, but I wake up feeling like she was there." Maybe she is, Mason said softly. Maybe part of her never left. Silence followed, warm and full. Outside, snow began to fall again, gentle flakes drifting through the still air. That afternoon, they decorated a small tree in the living room, something Harper had always insisted on doing together, even when money was tight or time was short. Naomi found a box of old ornaments in the attic and carefully hung one shaped like a mountain range, painted blue and orange and green, the same colors as the sticker that had once clung to Harper's truck. Caleb placed a framed photo of Harper beneath the tree, not as an altar, but as a promise that she was not forgotten, that the light she carried into the world still burned in the lives she left behind. That night, after Mason had gone and the snow had settled in soft mounds across the yard, Naomi stood alone on the front porch, the cold air brushing her cheeks. She looked out over the vast Nevada landscape, the same desert that had once stolen everything from her, but had, in the end, returned her to where she belonged. The porch light glowed behind her, unchanged in its quiet resilience. She didn't turn it off. She left it on, not out of habit or hope, but because it had become a part of them, a symbol not of waiting, but of returning. Caleb joined her, wrapping a blanket around both their shoulders. Together, they watched the snow fall. The road ahead would be long. There would be therapy sessions, more interviews, the possibility of testifying in court, and the ever-present challenge of navigating a world she'd been kept from for over a decade. But in that moment, they were simply two survivors sharing the stillness of a winter night, the light above their heads steady and warm. Naomi looked up at her brother and smiled. "I think we're going to be okay." Caleb squeezed her hand. "Yeah," he said. "We already are." If this story moved you, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Let us know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you believe in miracles, write God, help them below.